Well, welcome back. I'm John Miller, founding attorney of Rock Solid Law and Title, now located in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida. I've been practicing in Northeast Florida since the mid 80s. We hope that this morning's session will be informative for you. I see somebody else just jumped on, so maybe a few more will join us as well. Got a nice group this morning. For those of you that are new, we use the chat button, which is, let's see how well I do this, right about here, I think, on your screen. And that's how you can ask any questions that you need. If they're general in nature and I know the answer, I'll be glad to address them. Otherwise, we can take them offline after the session. And for any questions that are specific in nature, like to you, or, maybe they're a little bit privileged, you can send that question to questions@rocksolidlaw.com. And that is comes to a member of my team who will funnel the question to me and we'll get an answer out to you. So Veterans Homestead in Florida is the subject of today's webinar. We're going to talk about keeping and filing for and keeping those exemptions. So an interesting fact, Florida has about 1.5 million veterans. It's approximately 10% of the population. And when you think about spouses and other dependents, why a good portion of our population is veterans. And therefore, these tax exemptions for homestead property are really, really important in our state. We have a number of military bases all over Florida. But I also believe that, military service can be transient, and a lot of people in a lot of the branches of our service serve at some point in their lives in our beautiful Sunshine State. And I think they come to the realization that once their tour of duty is over, they might like to come back to Florida. And that's one of the reasons that we have so many veterans here. As we get started, I'm going to introduce you to a couple of guys. This rather dour-looking, stern gentleman is General Andrew Pickens. And General Pickens was a Revolutionary War hero and American founder. That is the subtitle of this book, The Life and Times of General Andrew Pickens, which is published by the University of North Carolina Press. General Pickens is my direct ancestor. I mean, you see the likeness, right? He was a Presbyterian. He was of Scottish descent. And as I understand it, he would ride his horse into town and everybody would get quiet around him. He was a hero of the Revolutionary War and helped to found our country. He was in South Carolina. And I know from my family history that the Battle of Cowpens was one in which he took a heroic stand. The reason I wanted to tell you about this general and the next officer is because while I have not personally served, service to the U.S. through the military is very important to me in my family history. In fact, my father having passed away, my application is currently pending for the Society of the Cincinnati, and I will represent General Pickens in the South Carolina Society, which has one living representative of each officer who served in our American Revolutionary War. So I wanted you to know General Andrew Pickens. The book is available through the University of North Carolina Press. The second, still stern, but significantly less dour individual I'd like to introduce you to this morning is Colonel Francis Pickens Miller. This is my father's father. He was from the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. And among the many important things that he did in his life was to be a colonel in the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services. That's our Secret Service. And he was the principal American liaison with the French during World War II. So he helped the folks that ended up driving the Nazis out of France. And my grandfather, as our family calls him, the Colonel, was part of taking back of Berlin and was in fact in Hitler's office the day that Berlin fell. His autobiography, which was on the New York Times bestseller list in its day, is Man from the Valley, Memoirs of a 20th Century Virginian. Fascinating guy, served on the World Council of Churches and also obviously for the US Army. Makes me a little odd here in Northeast Florida in that we are primarily a Navy town, but I always joke with my Navy friends that I'm for the wrong team. I believe that's in November of each year, and they say we're all on the same team. Just once in a while, we have to have athletic contests between our academies. So military service, very important to the founding and carrying out of this country. And those of you that study history, and I love history, realize that for most of our history, this country has been involved in one war or another. Not much recently, not too much recently. Of course, we were in Afghanistan for a long, long time, and we had Desert Storm before that. So we are creating veterans. We are creating veterans who have seen the theater of battle. And in honor of that, our glorious state of Florida, and I'm not a native, but I've been here way over half my life, so I consider myself at least to have semi-native status. I am a Floridian as much as I'm a Virginian, has decided to have multiple different exemptions to taxes for our veterans. Now, these are a bit complex, and there are a lot of them. So all we can do during the period of this webinar is to touch on each of them, and if any are of particular import or relevant to you, your family, or your clients, why you will just know to identify those issues so they can follow up specifically and make sure that they take advantage of every exemption which is available to them. By the way, one thing that I'm proud to do is collect usually old library versions of my grandfather's autobiography. And just for being online with me today, the first of you who sends an email to questions@rocksolidlaw.com, I'll make sure that you get a copy of this biography, The Man from the Valley. Questions@rocksolidlaw.com, and I'll be glad to share a copy of that with you. So let's dive into it, guys. This is complex. A lot of times I'm able to talk extemporaneously about the legal subjects we discuss, but this one I have to read to you, and I will try to cover as much as I can. I do prefer to talk rather than read, but I don't want to misinform you, and I don't want to leave out anything important. So eligibility for these tax exemptions obviously depends on satisfying certain requirements. The property appraiser's office in the county where the veteran or surviving spouse owns a homestead is the source for the accurate information for these exemptions. So a service member's next of kin or other person who has written authorization may file a homestead exemption claim on behalf of the service member who cannot file in person because of a service obligation. And that would be filing for an exemption if the service member was deployed during the previous calendar year outside the continental US, Alaska, and Hawaii in support of a designated operation. And that is available to any member or former member of any branch of the United States military, reserves, Coast Guards, or its reserves, and the Florida National Guard. And all of that is designated by the legislature at any given time. The percent of that taxable value that is exempt corresponds with the percent of time during the previous year that the service member was deployed. Also, now there are many alsos to this. It's not either or, and it can be both and, depending on any individual circumstance. If they meet certain requirements, veterans 65 or older, and those are going to be a lot of our population in Florida, are partially or totally permanently disabled, may receive a discount on the assessed value of the property that they own or use as homestead. This discount is a percentage equal to the percentage of the veteran's permanent service connected disability as determined by the Department of Veterans Affairs. And eligible veterans who want to apply for these exemptions may apply before they receive the necessary documentation, and the documentation comes during the process. After the property appraiser receives the documentation, that exemption will be effective as of the date of the original application. It relates back. So you want to get those applications in quickly. This is kind of cool. When a person serving in the armed forces owns or uses property as a homestead, if you've got a homestead, you can rent it out without abandoning your homestead claim. For those surviving spouses of people who were killed in military service, there's a homestead exemption if they died from service-related causes. That's called the Fallen Heroes Act. Another one, an ex-service member who is honorably discharged, is a resident of Florida, and who is disabled to at least 10% because of a misfortune while serving during wartime, can be entitled to a $5,000 reduction in the property's assessed value. This exemption is not limited to homestead property. So think about that. It could be on multiple investment properties. And under certain circumstances, the surviving spouse can also claim this one. Next, veterans who are Florida residents and were honorably discharged with a service-related total and permanent disability may be eligible for a total exemption from ad valorem taxes on the property they own and use as their homestead. A similar exemption is available to disabled veterans confined to wheelchairs. And under certain circumstances, the surviving spouse may be entitled to carry over this exemption as well. I am privileged to serve a client who has a total disability related to service, and it's permanent, and is exempted from all ad valorem taxes on homestead. It is a significant benefit to those people who have given that sacrifice for all of us. There is an additional homestead exemption for members of the active duty military and reserves, Coast Guard, reserves, and Florida National Guard. And the exemption for the deployed military, and I referenced this a little earlier, is different from other exemptions because there's no set dollar amount to be exempted. Rather, it's a prorated percentage based on the amount of time they were deployed during the previous year. I referenced a little while ago veterans confined to a wheelchair, and if they were honorably discharged and they have a service-connected total but not necessarily permanent disability, they're exempt from taxes as well. This one's has a number of requirements. So if you have a client who is confined to a wheelchair, I recommend reviewing this exemption with the property tax assessor to determine eligibility. Once again, with that honorably discharged veteran who has a service-connected total and permanent disability, that exemption is complete, and there are no income limitations. I forgot to mention that before. No income limitations required. Unfortunately, that question didn't come through on the chat, so please try again and type that into the chat bar. I only got "does this." So I'll be on a few more minutes. Give me another shot. Oh, there it comes. I do not know the answer to that question. And the question is, does the homestead exemption have any bearing on a benefit for VA aid and attendance? I believe the answer to that is no. I am not an expert in aid and attendance, but I do have resources who are. So if you would like to submit that question, please, to questions@rocksolidlaw.com. We will refer that question to an expert in that area. I believe the answer is that it does not, because this is property taxes and is separate and distinct from aid and attendance. But I am not qualified to give an opinion on that question. Great question. Obviously, and you know, from my familial history, I am in favor of as many benefits being given to our veterans as we can, given the service that they have rendered to all of us. So a little bit with respect to the surviving spouse. Some of the things that continue the exemptions are they were still married when the veteran died. The veteran must have been a permanent resident of Florida on January 1 of the year they died. The surviving spouse must have legal or beneficial title to the property when the veteran died. That could be imposed by the Florida spousal constitutional rights. And if they remarry, they lose the exemption. And it may be transferred as sort of portability is from one property to another for a new homestead in Florida. That's kind of an interesting one. With regard to the $5,000 exemption, the same. Let's see. They have to be married to the veteran for at least 5 years at the time of death, and not remarried. And veteran was a Florida resident at the time of the death. So there's less requirements to qualify, but the 5 year, you have to be married 5 years. It can't be a brand new spouse on that one. And then again, on the veteran who died on active duty, the surviving spouse obviously will get that exemption as long as the veteran had been a permanent resident of Florida on January 1 of the year he or she died. And again, they can't remarry. They lose that benefit if they remarry. So as you can see from this discussion, there are multiple opportunities for our veterans to take advantage of tax exemptions on their properties. More recently, Amendment 6 was adopted in 2006, which allowed the disabled veteran 65 years older to take the discount equal to the proportion of the disability. So the reason I bring that up now is that we are in a state of flux. So there can always be new exemptions granted to our veterans. And just a little, to me, recent history, that constitutional amendment on the ad valorem tax discount that I just referenced passed by 90%. So obviously, we as Floridians have spoken and have said that we want to respect our veterans and give them additional exemptions, and that will raise our revenue some other way. So the result of that of that election was 9,305,000 in favor and 1,065,000 against. I think the primary vote against was that it should not be in the Constitution, and that revenues necessary for police, fire, et cetera, the usual objections. So, and that the rest of the taxpayers had to pick up the tab. But by 10-1, by 9-1, we Floridians felt that they deserved it, and that with more than 60% was the required to amend the Constitution, the surviving spouse of the deceased veteran will receive a homestead property tax discount transferred to them. They can move it to another property, but they can't remarry. And it's got to be their homestead. So for anyone wanting to take advantage of any of these exemptions, then make sure and get to the property appraiser's office and get the information to properly file. Just like homestead and just like portability, you might be entitled to it, but unless you claim it, no one's going to just give it to you. And that's really the crux of my presentation this morning. There are many ways in which we honor veterans in Florida, and I just want to thank again Pamela for the excellent question. Yes, I know and agree with you completely, Pamela, that some benefits are interdependent. I believe, however, the state property tax exemptions do not affect aid and attendance. But again, I'd be happy to refer that out to an expert in that area. Please note that my team has placed a note in the chat bar. And if any of you would like to take advantage of the opportunity for a complimentary consultation, just as our thank you for you joining us this morning, I'll be happy to consult with respect to real property issues, as we've been discussing today, or with respect to estate planning. We obviously love to take care of our Florida families, or business matters. So I've practiced since the 80s in small business entrepreneurial representation, as well as real estate and estate planning. Would love to chat with you. One more time, the stern face of General Andrew Pickens. I keep this on my desk at all times to remind me of my family heritage and to keep me on the straight and narrow. And then my beloved grandfather, whom I knew for the first 18 years of my life, the man from the Shenandoah Valley, a Rhodes Scholar, served in both World Wars, and had a real primary role in the second one. I appreciate you guys joining us today. We will do another one of these. We're doing a monthly now. Folks don't seem as keen as during the pandemic to jump on. We have done a poll. We're going to be addressing the issues that you guys thought were most important. If you would like to submit to questions at Rock Solid Law, any suggestions for future webinars, or indeed any questions that you might have regarding the subject matter today or any other real property exemptions in Florida, we'll be glad to field those for you or to refer them to an appropriate party. I'm going back to our theme music. This is Zoom from Lionel Richie and the Commodores, who hail from my old hometown of Tuskegee, Alabama. Born in Virginia, raised in Alabama and Florida, and came back to Florida as soon as I could after law school, actually in the Valley, the Shenandoah Valley at Washington Lee University. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you joining us. Keep dry, be safe, and have an amazing day. I'm John Miller, founding attorney, Rock Solid Law and Title.